All right, I'm gonna try and get this all in one go. So, confirmation, friends, if we're going to be spending the next month and a half talking about faith, hope, and love, first thing we need to talk about is faith and what we have faith in. And put simply, the absolute center of Christianity is Jesus. All right? And very, very specifically, the center point of Jesus' life that we can first look at is his death and resurrection. All right? And although even before we get to that, we need to answer one simple question. Was Jesus a real, actual, living, breathing human being? Or did somebody just make him up like 2,000 years ago? You know, it's been a while. Did somebody make him up and we just can't figure out that that happened? And we've just been chasing dreams for a couple thousand years? So, we need to answer that question first, because as Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians, if Christ did not rise from the dead, we above all people are the most to be pitied. Okay? So, first question. Was Christ a real, living, breathing human being? What evidence do we have? We have the New Testament, a little bit biased, because it's composed entirely of people that followed him. We have two other people, all right? The first one is called Flavius Josephus. I know, his name was Flavius Josephus. He was born right about the same time, like within a few years of Jesus' death. So he grew up walking around and talking to and interviewing and knowing people who were at the crucifixion, who watched Jesus deliver the Sermon on the Mount, watched Jesus perform miracles and stuff like that. Now, we don't think that Flavius Josephus, was a believer, but he was important because he was a historian. He wrote a 20-volume text called Jewish Antiquities. It was a history book during the Roman Empire about Judaism. All right? As a matter of fact, Josephus was around during the invasion and subsequent destruction of Rome, or Jerusalem, not Rome. That comes later. But he was around for the destruction of Jerusalem. Anyway, during his 20-volume text, he recounts two instances of Jesus. All right? And the first one, actually, weirdly enough, is about the unlawful execution of James. And here's how he put it. James, brother of Jesus, whom some call the Messiah. Now, I realize that was backwards if you're reading it in English. James, brother of Jesus, whom some call the Messiah. Okay? Which is kind of interesting, because if he mentions, James, and he's pointing out James, but he's using his brother Jesus as a milestone, that means that Jesus is actually a bigger milestone than James is, because he can assume that other people have already heard about Jesus. All right, the second, paragraph mention of Jesus in Josephus's huge text is he records that there was a man named Jesus who was living around the time that Jesus lived, performing miraculous deeds, and was executed by Pontius Pilate, which kind of sounds like our Jesus, right? All right, now the second historian that we can point to, not being really biased towards Jesus existing or not existing, was a guy named Tacitus. Okay, he lived around 90 AD. He was a senator and a historian of Rome. And he has a couple iterations where he mentions Jesus, but one of the most important ones was when Nero, having been accused of burning down a portion of Rome. If you don't remember that, you can look it up. There are some wonderful YouTube videos on that. But he said Nero blamed the Christians who find their faith in Christus, which is Roman for Christ, who was executed by Pontius Pilate in the area of Judea, which sounds like Jesus again. Now, both of these historians have no real reason to dispute or fabricate the actual existence of Jesus, which tells us that we can pretty assuredly believe that Jesus actually existed.